Chapter 17. Cassia. Someone's coming into the archivist's hiding place. I hear their feet on the stairs. Since I'm waiting in the main area with the others, I shine my flashlight up like the rest. The figure stops, expecting us. Once I see who it is, a trader I've passed down here before, I drop my light. But many of the others don't. She's trapped there like a moth. A nearby archivist signals for me to bring my light back up, and so I do, blinking, though the girl standing in the doorway is the only one caught in the glare. Samara Rook, the head archivist says, "You should not be here." The girl laughs nervously. She wears a bulky pack, and she shifts it down a little. "Don't move," the head archivist says. "We'll escort you out." "I'm allowed to trade here," Samara says. "You're the one who showed me where this place is." "You are no longer welcome," the head archivist says. She's somewhere in the shadows, and then she steps forward, pointing the beam of her flashlight right into the girl's eyes. This is the archivist's place. They decide who stays in the shadows and shades and who has to face the light. "Why?" Samara asks, her voice finally faltering a little. "You know why," the archivist says. "Do you want everyone else to know as well?" The girl licks her lips. "You should see what I found," she says. "I promise you're going to want to know." She reaches for the pack at her side. "Samara cheated," the archivist says, her voice every bit as powerful as the pilot's. It resonates around the room. None of the lights waver, and when I close my eyes, I can still see their bright spots and the girl's nervous, blinded expression. "Someone gave an item to Samara to trade on their behalf. She brought it here. We assessed its value, accepted it, and gave an item in return, with a separate, smaller item for the trader fee. And then Samara kept both." There are crooked traders in the world, plenty of them, but they don't usually dare to try to work with the archivist. "You're not out anything," Samara says to the archivist. "You got your payment." Her attempt at defiance makes me ache with pity. What made her do this? Surely she knew she'd get caught. If anyone should get to punish me, it's the person I stole from. "No," the head archivist says. "You undermine us when you steal." Three of the archivists drop their lights and move forward. My heart pounds, and I step back a little farther into the shadows. Though I come down here often, I'm not an archivist. At any time, my privileges, which are more than those afforded to traders, could be revoked. I hear the click of scissors, and the head archivist steps back, holding Samara's red bracelet up in the air. Samara looks ashen, but unharmed, and in the lights, still directed on her, I could see her sleeve pulled up and her bare wrist where the bracelet used to be. "People should know," the archivist says to the room at large, "that they can trust when they trade with us. What has happened here undermines everything. Now we will have to pay the price of the trade." The others have dropped their lights down now, and so her voice is the most recognizable part of her. Her face is in shadows. "Paying the price for another is not something we like to do." Then her tone changes, and the incident is over. Finished. "You may all go back to your trades." I don't move. Who's to say I wouldn't do what Samara did if something passed through my hands that I needed for someone else? Because I think that's what's happened. I don't think Samara risked this for herself. I feel a hand on my elbow, and I turn to see who it is. It's the head archivist herself. "Come with me," she says. "There's something I need to show you." She brings me through rows of shelves and through a long hall, dark hall, her grip firm on my arm. And now we're in another vast room ribbed with metal shelves, but these are all filled. They're lined with everything anyone could ever want, every lost piece of paper, piece of a past, every fragment of a future. Other archivists move along the shelves while some stand guard. This room has other lights strung along the ceiling and glowing faintly. I catch a glimpse of cases and boxes and containers of uneven sizes. You would need a map to find your way through a place like this. I know where we are before she tells me, even though I've never been here before. The archives. It's a little like seeing the pilot for the first time. I've always known of the existence of this place, but to confront it face to face makes me want to sing, or weep, or run away. I'm not certain which. "The archives are filled with treasures," the archivist says, "and I know every one." Her hair shines golden in this light, as if she is the one of the treasures she guards. Then she turns to look at me. Not many people have been here, she says. Then why me, I wonder. There are many stories that have passed through my hands, the archivist says. I always liked the one about a girl who was tasked with turning straw into gold, an impossible piece of work, but she managed it more than once. That's what this job is like. The archivist walks partway down an aisle and lifts a case from a shelf. She opens it, and inside I see rows and rows of paper-wrapped bars. She takes one of them out and holds it up. If I could, she says, I would stay in here all day. This is where I began my work as an archivist. I sorted the items and cataloged them. She closes her eyes and breathes in deeply, and I find myself doing the same. The scent coming from the case is familiar, a memory, but I can't place it at first. My heart beats a bit more quickly, and I have a sudden rush of remembered anger, unexpected, out of place. And then I know. It's chocolate, I say. Yes, she says. When was the last time you had any? My match banquet, I say. Of course, she says. She closes the case and reaches for another and opens it. I see glints of silver that at first I think are boxes from banquets, but instead are forks, knives, spoons. Then another case, this one handled even more gently than the others, and inside I see pieces of china, bone white and fragile as ice. Then we move to another aisle, and she shows me rings with red and green and blue and white stones, and over again to another row, where she takes out books with pictures so rich and beautiful I have to hold my hands together so that I won't touch the pages. There is so much wealth in here. Even if I wouldn't trade for silver or chocolate, I understand why someone else would. Before the society, that archivist said, people used to use money. There were coins, some of them gold, and crisp green papers. They traded with each other, and it represented different things. How did it work? I ask. Say I was hungry, the archivist says. I'd give someone 5 of the papers, and they'd give me some food. But then what would they do with the papers? Use them to get something else, she says. Did they have things written on them? No, she says, nothing like your poems. I shake my head. Why would anyone do that? Trading the way the archivists do seems much more logical. They trusted each other, the archivist says, until they didn't anymore. She waits. I'm not sure what she expects me to say. What I'm showing you, the archivist says, are the things that most people find to be valuable, and we also have cases and cases full of very specific items for more eccentric tastes. We have been doing this for a long time. She leads me back the way we came, to the rows where the jewels were stored. She stops for a moment to take down a case. She doesn't open it, but carries it with her as we walk. Everyone has a currency, she says. One of the most interesting ones is knowledge, when people want to know things, not possess them. Of course, what people want to know is a similarly varied and intricate business. She stops near the end of one of the shelves. What is it you want to know, Cassia? I want to know if my family and Kai and Xander are all right, what grandfather meant by the Red Garden Day, what memories I've lost. I'll pause in that decadent, deliberate room. Her flashlight glances off the shelves, sending slants and glints of light in strange places. Her face, when I can see it, looks thoughtful. Do you know what's extremely valuable right now? She asks me. Those tubes that the society had. The secret ones. Have you heard of them? The samples they took long before the final banquet? I've heard of them, I say. I've seen them too. All rolled and stored in a cave in the middle of a canyon. While we were there in that cave, Hunter broke some of the tubes, and Eli and I each stole one of the others. You're not the only one who has, the archivist says. The head archivist says. Some people will do anything they can to get their hands on those samples. The tubes don't matter, I say. They're not real people. I'm quoting Kai, and I hope the archivist can't hear the lie in my voice, because I stole Grandfather's tube from the carving and gave it to Kai to hide. And I did that because I can't seem to let go of the idea that those tubes could matter. That may be, the archivist says, but the others don't agree with you. They want their own samples, and the ones that belong to family and friends. If they lose a loved one in the plague, they'll want the tubes even more. If they lose a loved one in the plague. Is that possible? I wonder. But the minute I speak it, I know it is. Death is always possible. I learned that in the carving. Almost as if she's reading my mind, the archivist says, "You've seen the tubes, haven't you, when you were outside the society?" For some reason, I want to laugh. The cavern you were asking about? Yes, I've seen that, with rows and rows of tubes stored neatly in the earth. I have also seen a cave full of papers and golden apples on dark trees, twisted from growing in a place with great wind and little rain, and my name carved in a tree and paintings on stone. And in the carving I have seen burned bodies under the sky, and a man singing his daughter to the grave, marking her arms and his with blue. I have felt life in that place, and I have seen death. "You didn't bring back any of those tubes to trade, did you?" she asked me. How much does she know? "No," I say. "That's too bad," I say. She says, "What would people trade for the tubes?" I ask. "Everyone has something," the archivist says. "Of course, we don't guarantee anything except that the sample belongs to the right person. We don't promise that there's a way to bring anyone back. But it's implied," I say. "It would only require a few tubes to take you anywhere you wanted to go," the archivist says. "Like Kia Province." She waits to see if I rise to the bait. She knows where my family is. Or home to Oria. "What about," I say, thinking of Camus, "someplace else entirely?" We both look at each other, waiting. To my surprise, she speaks first, and it is then that I know how badly she wants those samples. "If you are asking for passage to the other lands," she says, very softly, "that is no longer possible." I've never heard of the other lands, only the other countries, marked on a map back in Oria, places synonymous with enemy territory. From the way the archivist speaks of the other lands, though, I can tell she means someplace entirely different and distant, and the little thrill goes through me. Even Kai, who lived in the outer provinces, has never mentioned the other lands. Where are they? For a moment I'm tempted to tell the archivist yes, to try and figure out more about places so remote they appear on no map I've ever seen, even the ones belonging to the villagers who once lived in the carving. "No," I say, "I don't have any tubes." For a moment we're both silent. Then the archivist speaks. "I've noticed that lately your focus has shifted away from trading," she says. "I've seen the gallery. It's quite an accomplishment." "Yes," I say. "Everyone has something worth sharing." The archivist looks at me with pity and astonishment in her eyes. "No," she says. "Everything done in the gallery has been done before, and better. But it's still a remarkable achievement in its own way." She is not the pilot. I know it now. She reminds me of my official, back in Oria. They both have in common their conviction that they are still learning, growing, when in fact they have long ago lost that ability. It's a relief to leave the archives and go to the gallery, which is alive and above ground. As I draw closer to the gallery, I hear something. Singing. I don't know the song. It's not one of the 100. I can't really understand the words. I'm too far away. But I hear the melody. A woman's voice rises and falls, aches and heals, and then in the chorus, a man joins it. I wonder if she knew he was going to sing too. If it was something they planned, or if she was surprised to suddenly find that she was not alone in her song. When they stop, at first there is silence, then a cheer from someone up at the front, and soon we all join in. I press closer through the crowd, trying to see the faces of those who are the music. "Another?" the woman asks, and we cry out our answer. Yes. This time, she sings something else, something short and clear. The tone is full of movement, but easy to follow. "I stole them rolling up the highest hill. You, my love, are calling. searching. We must keep on going. Now and then and still. Could this song be one from the outer provinces? It reminds me of the story of Sisyphus, and Kai said they kept their songs longer in the outer provinces. But all those people are gone now. That makes it seem like the words should be sad. But with the music behind them, they don't sound that way. I catch myself humming along, and before I know it, I'm singing, and so are the people around me. Over and over we go through the song, until we have the words and the melody right. At first, I'm embarrassed when I catch myself moving, and then I don't care anymore. I don't mind. All I wish is that Kai were here and that he could see me now, singing too and dancing in front of the world. Or Xander. I wish he were here. Kai already knows how to sing. Does Xander? Our feet thump on the ground, and we can no longer smell even a trace of the fishes' bodies that once bumped up against the shore because they're decayed now, gone to bone. The smell of them lost in the scent of our living, our flesh, the salt of our tears and sweat, the sharpness of green grass and plants trampled underfoot. We're breathing the same air, singing the same song. Chapter 18. Xander. Over the course of the night, 53 new patients come in. Not all of them have the rash and bleeding, but some do. The head physic orders them all quarantined to our wing and assigns me to be the physic over the mutation. I'll be in charge of managing the patient's care from the floor while he watches from the port. Doesn't want to risk his own skin, one of the nurses mutters to me. It's all right, I tell her. I want to see it through. But that doesn't mean you have to risk it. I can ask him to reassign you someplace else. She shakes her head. I'll be all right. She smiles at me. After all, you talked him into including the courtyard as part of the quarantine area. That makes a difference. We've got the cafeteria too, I say, and she laughs. None of us spend much time there anymore, except to take delivery of our meals. The virologist comes in to examine the patients himself. He's intrigued too. The bleeding occurs because the virus is destroying platelets, he tells me, which means the spleen is likely to become enlarged in the affected patients. A female medic near us nods. She's conducting a follow-up physical exam of one of the first patients. His spleen is enlarged, she says. It's protruding beneath the costal margin. And the patients are losing their ability to clear the secretions in their lungs and respiratory tracts, another medic says. We're going to run into trouble with pneumonia and infection if we can't get them better soon. Farther down the row of patients, we hear a shout. We've had a rupture, a medic calls. I think he's bleeding internally. I call out over the mini port for a surgic. We all gather around the patient, who has gone pale. The vital stats machine screams at us as the patient's blood pressure drops and his heart rate speeds up. The medics and surgics yell out instructions. This patient, and all the rest, lie completely still. We can't save him. We don't even have time to get him to a surgical room before he dies. I glance around at the patients nearby. I hope they haven't seen too much. What can they see? The weight of the patient's death settles over me as I pick up my mini port, which beeps insistently with the private message from the head physic. He's watched the whole thing from the main port. Sending patient data now. Review immediately. He wants me to look at data now? When we've just had a patient die. The entire team looks rattled. The point of the medical center and the rising is that we save people. We don't lose them like this. I walk over to the side of the room to check the data. At first, I don't understand the urgency. It's data from the patients who come in sick, and the information looks like basic medical workups. I'm not sure what it's supposed to tell me. Then I get it. The workups are all recent, from when the patients were immunized. The patients were immunized and they still got the mutation, which means a huge segment of the population is at risk. I'm going to have to lock down your ring completely, the head physic says from the mini port. I understand, I tell him. There's nothing else they can do. We're going into lockdown, I tell the team. They nod, exhausted. They understand. We've all been through this drills 100 times. We're here to save people. Then I hear footsteps behind me, running. I spin around. The virologist is heading for the main doors to the wing. Have they had time to lock it down yet? Or is he going to expose an entire new cluster of people to the mutated plague? I take off, running back down the rows of patients as fast as I can. He's older than me. It's short work to catch up, and I tackle him, throwing us both to the ground. You don't run, I say, not bothering to keep the disgust out of my voice. You stay to help when people are sick. That's part of your job. Listen, he says, struggling to sit up. I let him, but I hold onto his arms. We may not be safe from this mutation. Our immunizations may mean nothing. That's exactly why you can't risk exposing anyone else, I say. You know that better than anyone. I haul him up by the back of his uniform and walk toward one of the wing's storage closets. I don't want to lock him up, but I'm not sure how else to deal with him right now. Unless, the virologist says, sounding either crazy or inspired, the people with scars are safe. The small scars. I know what he means. The people who had the first round of the plague, I say. The Rising told us to look for the marks, and Leia and I talked about them, those small red scars between their shoulder blades. Yes, he says eagerly, they could have had a slightly mutated version of the earlier virus, and their variant is close enough to the mutant form that they're not getting it. But the immunization you and I were given, it was just chopped up pieces of the original virus. It won't be close enough to this new mutant form to protect us. I keep hold of him, but not to show that I'm listening. We didn't go down with the earlier version of the plague, he says, but we were still exposed. Our initial immunity protected us from the worst symptoms, but we could still contract that earlier version of the plague. That's how an immunization works. It teaches your body how to react to a virus, so your system recognizes the virus when it comes again. It's not that you don't get sick at all, but your body knows how to handle it. I know, I say. I figured out this much already. Listen to what I'm telling you, the virologist says. If that happened, if we actually contracted the first version of the plague, the one going around when the pilot first spoke, then we have the red mark too, and we're safe. We didn't go down, but we still had the virus. Our bodies just dealt with it. But if we didn't catch the earlier virus during that window, he spreads out his hands, we can still get the mutation, and we may not have a cure that works for this version. For a minute, he sounds crazy, like he's speaking gibberish, and then it all comes together, and I think he might be right. He twists his arm free from my grasp and starts unbuttoning the top of his plainclothes. Then he pulls out the collar of his black uniform. Look, he says, I don't have the small mark, do I? He doesn't. No, I say. I resist the urge to pull down my own collar and try to see if the mark is there. I've never thought to look for it on myself. You're needed here, and if you go out there, you can infect other people. You've been exposed to the mutation already, like the rest of us. I'll go out into the woods. People in the borders have always known how to survive. There are places I can go. Like where? I ask. Like the stone villages, he says. I raise my eyebrows. Is he confused? I don't know what those places are. I've never heard of them before. And do they have fluid and nutrient bags there? I ask. Do they have what you need to stay alive until there's a cure? And don't you care about exposing them to illness? He stares up at me with wild-eyed panic. Didn't you see him? He asks. That patient. He died. I can't stay here. Was that the first time you've seen anyone die in real life? I ask. People didn't die in a society, he says. They did. I say. They were just better at hiding it. And I understand why the virologist is afraid. I think about running away too. But only for a second. The head physician decides to relax the lockdown long enough to send us more patients and more personnel. He's heard everything the virologist told me over the mini-port, so he'll decide how to report it all to the pilot. I'm glad that's not my job. But I do have one request for the head physician. When you send in the new personnel, I say, make sure they know this new form of the virus hasn't responded yet to the cure. We don't need anyone else trying to run. We want them to know what they're getting into. It's not long before several rising officers, armed and wearing hazmat suits, escort the new personnel to our wing. The officers take the virologist away with them. I'm not sure where they'll quarantine him. In an empty room, on his own, perhaps. But he's become a liability, and we can't keep him here when he's so volatile. I'm so focused on making sure he's taken care of that it takes me a moment to realize that one of the new staff is Lay. As soon as I can, I find her in the courtyard. You shouldn't be here, I tell her quietly. We can't guarantee that it's safe. I know, she says. They told me. They're not sure the cure works on the mutation. It's more than that, I say. Remember when you and I were talking about the small red mark on people who had the earlier virus? Yes. The virologist they took out had a theory about that. What was it? He thought that if someone had the red mark, it meant they'd had the virus, like we thought, and he also thought that it meant that they were protected from the new mutation. How could that be? Lay asks. The virus changes, I say, like those fish you were talking about. It's one thing, now it's different. She shakes her head. I try again. People who had the immunizations had been exposed to one form of the virus, a dead one. Then the first round of the plague came along. Some of us might have contracted the virus, but we didn't really get sick because we'd already been exposed to it in its weakened form. The immunization did its job and our bodies fought off the illness. Still, we had exposure to the live virus itself, which means we might be safe from this mutation. The dead virus wasn't close enough to the mutation to protect us, but our exposure to the original live version of the plague might be, as long as we actually contracted it. I still don't understand, she says. I try again. According to his theory, those who have the red mark are lucky, I say. They've been exposed to the right versions of the virus at the right times, and that means they're safe from this mutation. Like stones in the river, she says, understanding crossing her face. Going across, you need to step on them in the right order to get safely to the other side. I guess so, I say. Or like the fish you were talking about. They change. No, she says. The fish remain themselves. They adapt. They look completely different, but they're not fundamentally altered or gone. All right, I say, though now I'm the one who's confused. She can tell. I suppose, she says, that you have to see them. Do you have the mark? I ask Lay. I don't know, she says. Do you? I shake my head. I'm not sure either, I say. It's not exactly in an easy place to see. I'll look for you, she tells me, and before I can say anything else, she steps around behind me, slides her fingers under my collar, and pulls it out. I feel her breath on my neck. If the virologist is right, then you're safe, she says, and I can hear the smile in her voice. You have the mark. Are you sure? I ask. Yes, she says. I am. It's right here. After she takes her hand away, I can still feel the spot where her finger pressed against my skin. She knows what I'm about to ask. No, she says. Don't look. I don't want it to change what I do. Later, as we leave the courtyard, Lay stops and looks at me. As she does, I realize that not very many people have eyes that are the color of hers. True black. I changed my mind, she says. At first, I'm not sure what she means, but then she sweeps her long hair to the side and says, I think I want to know. There's a faint tremor in her voice. The mark. She wants to know if she has it. All right, I say, and suddenly I feel awkward, which is ridiculous, because I've looked at plenties of bodies that are just bodies. I know they're people and I want to help them, but to some extent they're anonymous all the same. But her body will be hers. She turns it back to me and unbuttons her uniform, waiting. For a moment, I hesitate, my fingers hovering. Then I take a deep breath and pull her collar down. I'm careful not to brush her skin. The mark isn't there. And then, without thinking, I do touch her. I put my hands on her with my palm flat against the bone at the base of her neck and my fingers curving up into her hair, like I can hide this from her. Then I draw in my breath and pull my hand back. Stupid. Just because I'm fully immune doesn't mean I can't still carry some form of the mutated plague. I'm sorry, I begin. I know, she says. She reaches over and takes my hand down without looking at me. And for a brief moment, our fingers lock and hold on. Then she lets go and pushes open the door, walking inside the building without looking back. And out of nowhere, I think, so this is how it feels to stand at the edge of a canyon. Part 4. Plague. Chapter 19. Kai. The city of Oria looks like it got its teeth kicked out. The barricade here is no longer in a neat circle. Instead, it's riddled with gaps. The Rising must have run out of white walls to enclose the still zone, so they had to use metal fencing instead. I see the hot glint of it in the spring sun as we fly over. I try not to look in the direction of the hill. Others, Rising officers in black, wave up at us. We're flying lower now, and I can see people looting and pushing against weak places in the fence. The barricade is about to be breached. Even from up here, I can feel the panic. The situation has deteriorated too much to land, our commander says. We'll do a supply job. I have to admit that there have been times when I wish something bad would happen to the people of the boroughs in Oria. Like the time the society took me away and no one but Cassia ran after me. Or when the people laughed during the showings because I didn't understand death. I never wanted to see them die, but I would have liked for them to know how it felt to be afraid. I wanted them to know that their easy lives had a cost. But this is terrible to see. Over the past few weeks, the Rising has lost their grip on the people and the plague. They won't say what's happened, but something has. Even the archivists and traders seem to have completely disappeared. I have no way to get a message to Cassia. One of these days, I'm not going to be able to resist flying to Central. The most secure area is located in front of City Hall, says the commander. We'll make the job there. Are we dropping all our supplies at City Hall? I ask the commander. What about the boroughs? Everything in front of City Hall, he says. It's the safest way. I don't agree. We need to disperse the supplies, or it'll be a bloodbath. People are already trying to break through the barricade. When they see us drop, they're going to want to get inside even more. And I don't know how long the Rising can hold off having to use violence in a situation like this. Will they send the fighters in like they had to do in Acadia? Indy and I are last in the formation, so we circle around again while the others make their job. We're outside of the city proper now, moving back in over the boroughs. As we do, I see people coming out of their homes to watch us fly. They've obeyed the Rising's command to stay put and wait instead of coming to the barricade. And it means they'll likely starve, while the others at the walls fight over the supplies we've brought. I feel a fierce, unexpected surge of sorrow and loyalty to the people of the boroughs. They tried to follow orders and do the right thing. Is it their fault everything is such a mess? No. Yes. Prepare the job, the commander says. We've never done this before. Leave supplies without landing. But we were trained for it. There's a hatch in the belly of the ship where we can let the cargo out. Caleb, I say, switching on the speaker that goes into the hold. Are you ready? There's no answer. Caleb? I'm ready, he says, but his voice sounds off. I'm the pilot this time, so I'm in charge. Go see what's wrong with him, I tell Indy. She nods and walks over to the hold, her balance perfect even with the motion of the ship. I hear her open the hatch to the hold and go down the ladder. Is there a problem? The commander asks. I don't think so, I tell him. Caleb doesn't look good, Indy says a moment later, reappearing from the hold. I think he's sick. I'm all right, Caleb says, but his voice still has a hint of strain in it. I think I'm having a reaction to something. Do not drop your cargo, the commander says. Return immediately to the base. Indy looks at me and raises her eyebrows. Is he serious? I repeat, he says, do not drop cargo. Report immediately back to the base in Kamos. I look at Indy and she shrugs her shoulders. I ease the ship around and we fly over the people. I was coming in low for the job, and so I can see their faces turned up to watch us. They look like baby birds waiting for food. Here, I say to Indy, gesturing for her to take over the controls. I go down to check on Caleb. He's not strapped in anymore. He stands at the back of the hold, his hands pressed against the side of the ship, his head bent down, every muscle tight in agony. When he looks at me, I see fear in his eyes. Caleb, I say, what's happening? Nothing, he says. It's fine. Go back up above. You're sick, I say. But with what? We can't get the plague. Unless something went wrong. Caleb, I say, what's happening? He shakes his head. He won't tell me. The ship shifts a little and he stumbles. You know what's going on, I say, but you won't tell me. So how am I supposed to help you? There's nothing you can do, Caleb says. You shouldn't be here anyway if I'm sick. He's right. I turn to leave. When I sit down, Annie raises her eyebrows at me. Lock the hold, I say. Don't go back down. We're almost back to Kalmas before Caleb speaks again. We're flying over the long, flat fields of Tana, and I am, of course, thinking of Cassia and her family when Caleb's voice comes over the speaker. I changed my mind, he says. There is something you can do. I need you to write something down for me. I don't have any paper, I say. I'm flying the ship. You don't have to write it now, he says. Later. All right, I say. But first, you tell me what's happening. The commander is silent. Is he listening? I don't know, Caleb says. Then I can't write, I tell him. Silence. Tell me this, I say to Caleb. What was in those cases you kept bringing back when we delivered the cure? Tubes, Caleb says immediately, surprising me. We brought out tubes. Which tubes? I ask. But I think I know the answer. They'd fit in the cases perfectly. They're about the same size as the cures. I should have figured it out long ago. The tubes with the tissue preservation samples in them, Caleb says. I'm right, but I don't understand the reasoning. Why? I ask Caleb. The Rising took over the storage facilities where the Society kept the tubes, he says, but some members of the Rising wanted their family samples under their own personal control. The pilot provided that service for them. That's not fair, I say. If the Rising really is for everyone, they should have given all the samples back. Pilot Markham, our commander, says, you're engaging in speculation about your commanding officers, which amounts to insubordination. I order you to cease this line of conversation. Caleb doesn't say anything. So does the Rising think they can bring people back? I ask. The commander starts speaking again, but this time I talk over him, and so does Caleb. No, Caleb says, they know they can't. They know the Society couldn't either. They just want the samples, like insurance. I don't understand it, I say. Someone like the pilot should have seen enough death to know the tubes aren't worth anything. Why would he waste resources doing something so stupid? The pilot knows you can't bring people back with the samples, Caleb says. Not everyone else does. He uses that to his advantage. He exhales. The reason I'm telling you all this, he says, is that you need to believe in the pilot. If you don't, we're going to lose everything. I didn't know I was so important, I say. You're not, he says, but you and Indy are two of the best pilots. He'll need everyone he can get before this is all over. What's this, I ask. The plague? The Rising? You're right. The pilot does need all the help he can get. He hasn't managed to get anything under control so far. You don't even know him, Caleb says. He sounds angry. That's good. There's a little more life in his voice. I don't, I say, but you do, don't you? You knew him before the Rising came to power. We're both from Kalmas, he says. I grew up on the army base where he was stationed. He was one of the pilots who flew to the other lands. He took more people out to the stone villages than any other pilot, and he never got caught. He was the obvious choice to lead the Rising when it was time for a new pilot. I've lived in the outer provinces, I say, and I've never heard of the stone villages or the other lands. They're real, Caleb says. The other lands are the places far past the enemy territory. And the stone villages were built by anomalies along the edge of the outer provinces when the Society came to power. The villages are like stepping stones in a river. That's how they got their name. They run north to south, and they're all built a day's journey apart from one another. When you reach the last one, you have to cross through enemy territory if you want to go on to the other lands. You really haven't heard of the villages? Not by that name, I say, but my mind races. The farmers in the carving were far away from any other anomalies, but they did have the map with another village marked in the mountains. That village could have been the southernmost of the stone villages, the final one. It's possible. So what did the pilot do? I ask. He saved people, Caleb says. He and some of the other pilots would run people from the society out as far as the last stone village. He made citizens pay to get out, and he helped aberrations and anomalies too. That's who carved in the ships, isn't it? I say, understanding. People who are hiding there when the pilot flew them out. It was stupid of them, Caleb says, a hint of anger in his voice. They could have gotten the pilots in trouble. I think they meant it as a tribute, I say, remembering the picture carved on one of our earlier ships of the pilot giving the people water. That's what it looked like to me. It was still stupid, Caleb says. Do people live in the villages anymore? I ask. I don't know, Caleb says. They might have all left for the other lands by now. The pilot tried to get them to join the rising, but they wouldn't. That sounds like the anomalies who lived in the carving. They wouldn't join the rising either. It makes me wonder what happened to Anna's people when they reached the village we saw marked on the map. Did they meet the stone villages there? Did the groups have enough in common to get along? Did the people living in the stone villages help the people from the carving, or did they drive them away? Or worse, what's happened to Hunter and Eli? Other kids grew up telling stories about the pilot, Caleb says, but I grew up watching him fly. I know he's the one who can lead us out of this. Caleb sounds terrible. The pain's winning out. I can hear it thick in his voice, and I know what's happening. He's going still. He was supposed to be immune. Something's happened with the plague. Is this a new version of it, one our immunity can't protect us against? I want you to write down everything I said about the pilot, Caleb says, including that I believed in him until the end. Is this the end? I ask. Silence. Caleb? Nothing. Did he go still? Indy asks. Or decide he didn't want to talk anymore? I don't know, I say. She stands up as if she's about to go down into the hold. No, I say. Indy, you can't risk exposure to whatever it is. He didn't tell you much, Indy says, sitting back down. I bet there were plenty of people who knew that about the tubes and the pilot. We didn't, I remind her. You believe Caleb because he has those notches on his boots, she says. But it doesn't mean he was in the camps. Anyone could have cut their boots like that. I think he was out there, I say. But you don't know that he was. No. He is right about the pilot, though, Indy says. So you do believe Caleb, I say. About the pilot, at least. I believe myself about the pilot, Indy says. I know that he's real. She leans closer to me for a minute, and I think she might kiss me again, like she did all those weeks ago. The villages are real too, she says, and the other lands. All of it. Her voice is every bit as impassioned as Caleb's was, and I understand her. Indy loves me, but she's a survivor. When I told her I wouldn't run with her, she turned to something else to keep going. I believe in Cassia. Indy believes in the rising of the pilot. We've both found something to pull us through. It could have been different, I say, almost under my breath. If I'd kissed Indy again after she kissed me, if I hadn't known Cassia before I met Indy. But it's not, Indy says. And she's right. Chapter 20. Cassia. The world is not well. I look out the window of my apartment and put my hand on the glass. It's dark. Crowds gather at the barricade, the way they do often now at night, and soon the rising officers will come in black and disperse them all, petals to the wind, leaves on the water. The rising hasn't told us exactly what's happened, but for the past few weeks, we've all been confined to our apartments. Those of us who can send in our work over the ports. All communication with other provinces has ceased. The rising says that it is temporary. The pilot himself promises that everything will be fine soon. It has begun to rain. I wonder what it would have been like to see a flash flood in the carving from up high like this. I'd like to have stood at the edge of the canyon and felt the rumble, closed my eyes to hear the water better. opened them again to see the world laid to waste, the rocks and trees torn and tumbling down. It would have been something to watch what looked like the end of the world. Perhaps I am witnessing that now. A chime sounds from my kitchen. Dinner has arrived, but I'm not hungry. I know what the food will be. Emergency rations. We have only 2 meals each day now. Someday they will run out of the rations too. And then I don't know what they'll do. If we start to feel sick and tired, we're supposed to send a message on the port. Then they'll come and help us. But what if you go still while you sleep? I wonder. The thought makes me lie awake at night. It's become difficult to find any rest. I pull the meal from the delivery slot. There it is, cold and bland and blank. The Society's stores served to us by the Rising. I have learned a few things from the archivists. Food is running out, therefore it is valuable, so I've used it to trade my way out of my confinement in my apartment. I take the meal out to the Rising Guard at the entrance of our building. He's young and hungry, so he understands. Be careful, he says, and he holds open the door for me as I slip into the night. I feel my way down the stones and steps, my hands brushing against the sides and coming away with the familiar green smell and feel of moss. The recent rain has made things slippery, and I have to concentrate, keeping the beam of my flashlight steady. When I reach the end of the hallway, I'm not blinded the way I usually am. No flashlights flicker onto me, no beams swing in my direction as people notice me coming through the door. The archivists are gone. A chill runs up my spine as I remember how this place reminded me of the crypt from the 100 history lessons. I close my eyes, imagining the archivists lying down on the shelves, folding their hands on their chests, holding perfectly still as they wait for death to come. Slowly, I shine my light on the shelves. They are empty, of course. No matter what, the archivists will survive. But they didn't tell me that they were leaving, and I have no idea where they might have gone. Did they leave anything back in the archives? I'm about to go look when I hear feet on the stairs, and I spin around, swinging up my flashlight to blind whoever has entered. Cassia? The voice asks. It's her, the head archivist. She came back. I lower the light so she can see. I was hoping to find you, she says. Central is no longer safe. What has happened? I ask. The rumors about a mutated plague, she says, have been proven to be true, and we've confirmed that the mutation has spread here to Central. So you've all run away, I say. We have all decided to stay alive, she says. I have something for you. She reaches into the pack she carries and pulls out a slip of paper. This came in at last. The paper is real and old, printed with dark letters pressed deep into the page, not the slick surface blackness of printing from a port. There are 2 stanzas, the ones I don't have. Even though time is short and the world is wrong, I can't help but glance down, greedy to read a bit of the poem. The sun goes crooked. That is night. Before he makes the bend, we must have passed the middle sea. Almost we wish the end. We're further off. Too great it seems. So near the hole to stand. I want to read the rest, but I feel the head archivist's gaze on me, and I look back up. Something has gone crooked here. Night is coming. Am I drawing close to the end? It almost feels like it. That there can't be much farther to go, having come so far already, and yet nothing feels finished. Thank you, I say. I'm glad it came in time, she says. I've never left a trade unfinished. I hold the poem back up and put it in my sleeve. I keep my expression neutral, but I know she'll hear the challenge in what I'm about to say. I'm grateful for the poem, but you've still left a trade unfinished. My microcard never came in. She laughs a little, the sound echoing through the empty archives. That one has come through too, she says. You'll receive the microcard in Camas. I don't have enough to pay for passage to Camas, I say. How did she find out that's where I want to go? Does she really have a way for me to get to Camas? Or is she playing a cruel joke on me? My heartbeat quickens. There's no fee for your journey, the head archivist says. If you go to your gallery and wait, someone from the Rising will arrive to bring you out. The gallery. I've never kept it hidden, but something about it being used like this feels wrong. I don't understand, I say. The archivist pauses. What you've traded, she says, very carefully, has been interesting to some of us. It's like my official, again. I was not interesting to her, but my data was. When my official said that the society had put Kai into the matching pool, I saw the flicker of a lie in her eyes. She wasn't sure who had put it in. I think the head archivist is keeping something from me too. I have so many questions. Who put Kai in the pool? Who paid for my passage to Camas? Who stole my poems? This, I think I know. Everyone has a currency. The archivist told me that herself. Sometimes we might not even know what our price is until we are confronted with it, face to face. The archivist could resist everything else in that treasure trove of the archives but my papers. Smelling of sandstone and water and just out of reach were irresistible to her. I've already paid my passage, I say. Haven't I? With my pages from the lake. It's so quiet here, underneath the ground. Will she admit to it? I'm certain I'm right. The impassive stone of the archivist's face looks entirely different from the flicker I saw on the official's face when she lied to me. But both times, I feel the truth. The official didn't know. The archivist took my papers. My obligation to you is finished now, she says, turning to leave. You're aware of the chance for passage to Camas. It is yours to keep or refuse. She moves away from the beam of my flashlight into the dark. Goodbye, Cassia, she says. And then she's gone. Who will be waiting for me at the gallery? Is the passage to Camas real, or is it one final betrayal? Did she arrange it for me? Perhaps out of guilt for taking my papers? I don't know. I can't trust her anymore. I pull off the red bracelet that marked me as one of the archivist's traders and put it on the shelf. I have no need of it, because it does not mean what I thought it did. I find my case sitting alone on its shelf. When I open it and I see the contents inside, I find I want none of them. They are part of other people's lives, and it feels like they no longer have place in my own. But I will keep the poem the archivist gave me, because this, I think, is real. The archivist might have stolen from me, but I cannot believe she would forge something. This poem is true. I can tell. We step like plush. We stand like snow. I stop at that line and remember when I stood at the edge of the carving and the snow looking out for Kai. And I remember when we said goodbye at the edge of the stream. The waters murmur now. 3 rivers and the hill are past. 2 deserts and the sea. Now death usurps my premium and gets the look at thee. No, that can't be right. I read the last 2 lines again. Now death usurps my premium and gets the look at thee. I switch off my lights and tell myself that the poem doesn't matter after all. Words mean what you want them to mean. Don't I know that by now? For a moment, I'm tempted to stay there, hidden among the warren of shelves and rooms. I could go above ground now and then to gather food and paper, and isn't that enough to live on? I could write stories. I could hide from the world and make my own instead of trying to change it or live in it. I could write people, and I would love them too. I can make them almost real. In a story, you can turn to the front and begin again, and everyone lives once more. That doesn't work in real life, and I love my real people the most. Bram, my mother, my father, Kai, Xander. Can I trust anyone? Yes. My family, of course. Kai, Xander. None of us would ever betray the other. Before I came here, Indy and I ran a river, and we didn't know if it would poison us or deliver us to where we wanted to go. We took a dangerous black water risk, Even now, I think I can feel the spray as we went down, the swell as we were swept under. It was worth it then. I remember again the cavern and the carving. It and the archives mingled together in my mind. Those muddy, fossilized bones and clean little tubes, these empty shells and vacant rooms, and I realized that I can never stay in these hollowed out places in the earth for long before I have to come up for air. This passage to Kamas, I tell myself, is a risk I am willing to run. You cannot change your journey if you are unwilling to move at all. I hide in alleys, behind trees. When I wrap my hands around the bark of a small willow in a green space, I feel fresh letters carved into it, and they don't spell my name. The tree is sticky with its own blood. It makes me sad. Kai never cut deeply like this when he carved on something living. I wipe my hands on my black plain clothes and wish there was a way to leave a mark without taking. I'm not even halfway to the lake when I hear and see the airships. They soar in overhead, carrying pieces of the barricade back toward the city. No, I think, not the gallery. I run through the sheets, darting away from lights and people, trying not to count how many times the ships come overhead. Someone calls out to me, but I don't recognize the voice, so I keep going. It's too dangerous to stop. There's a reason why we are supposed to stay inside. People are angry and afraid, and the rising is finding it increasingly difficult to cure and keep peace. I run out into the dark of the marsh. Rising officers in black climb up to secure cables to the barricade walls, while the ships hover over, their blades chopping through the air. I can just make out what's happening from the lights of the ships above and from the steadier beacons of those that have landed in the marsh. The gallery is still there, ahead of me, if I can just reach it in time. I press up against the wall, breathing hard. I'm getting closer. The lake smell of water hits me. One of the gallery walls lifts into the sky, and I stifle a cry. So much would be lost if the gallery is gone. All those papers, everything we made. And how will I ever find the person who was supposed to take me to Kamas if the meeting place no longer exists? I'm running as hard as I can into the carving to find Kai. They lift the second piece of the gallery from the ground. No, no, no. Within moments, I'm standing there, staring down at the deep grooves in the earth, where papers float into puddles, like sails without boats. Paintings, poems, stories, all drowned. The people who used to meet here, who still have words and songs inside, what will happen to them? And how will I get to Kamas now? Cassia, someone says, you were almost too late. I know her instantly. Even though I haven't heard her speak in months, I can never forget the voice of the person who piloted me down the river. Indy, I say, and there she is, wearing black and standing up from her hiding spot among the marsh plants and bracken. They sent you to bring me to Kamas, I say, and I laugh, because now I know I will get there, whatever else happens. Indy and I ran to the carving. We came down the river, and now we're going to fly, Indy tells me, but we have to go. I follow her, running to her ship on the ground. You don't have to worry about any other rising being on the ship, she says over her shoulder. I'm the only one who flies alone, but we can't talk on board. The other ships might be listening in, and you have to ride in the hold. All right, I say, breathless. I'm glad I have no case to hinder me. It's enough to keep up with Indy as it is, carrying nothing but the lightness of paper. We reach the ship, and Indy scrambles up. I follow and stand just for a moment in surprise at all the lights in the cockpit that Indy must manage. Our eyes meet, and we both smile. Then I hurry and climb down into the hold. Indy shuts the door, and I am alone. The ship is smaller and lighter than the ones we flew into the camps. A few tiny lights line the floor, but the hold is largely dark, and there are no windows. I'm so tired of flying blind. I run my hands along the walls of the ship, trying to distract myself by discovering all that I can about my surroundings. There, I think I found something. A tiny line, scratched into the wall near the floor. L. In L? Lowercase? I smile a little to myself. And how I want to find letters in everything. It could be a scratch. the haphazard scarring and scraping that comes with the loading and shifting of cargo. But the more time I spend running my fingers over it, the more I'm convinced it was carved with intent. I try to feel for more, but I can't stretch any farther while I'm strapped in. Glancing at the door to the hold, I unbuckle the strap and move quietly so that I can feel farther down. There are many of them, carved in a row. L, 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 L. This letter must mean something, I think, to write it so many times. And then I realize, not letters, notches, like the ones Kai told me about the decoys cutting into their boots to mark time survived out in the work camps. I remember what Kai told me about his friend, Vic, how every day he marked was a day without the girl he loved. Kai and I have been marking too, with flags on the hill. With the poetry of others and with words of our own, whoever carved here was keeping time and holding on. I do the same, running my fingers along each tiny groove in the metal over and over again, thinking about the pieces of the gallery lifted up into the sky. I wonder if, when the rising sets them down again to make a wall, some of the papers will have survived the flight. The door to the hatch opens and Indy beckons for me to come up. The ship is flying itself, somehow. Indy sits back down at the controls. She gestures for me to take the seat next to her, and I do, my heart pounding. Until now, I've never been able to see while I fly, and I feel a dizzying lightness as I look out at the land below us. Is this what I've missed? The stars have come down to the earth, and the ocean has turned over the ground. Dark waves meet the sky. They are unmoving, barely visible, but for the light of the sun rising behind them. Mountains, I realize. That's what the ocean is. Those waves are peaks. The stars are lights in houses and on streets. The earth reflects the sky, and the sky meets the earth, and every now and then, if we're lucky, we have a moment to see how small we are. Thank you, I want to tell Indy. Thank you for letting me see while I fly. I have wanted it for so long.